Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're going to start this week off with a discussion of the ARC Troopers episode from Season 3 of the Clone Wars. Jay, want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are before we jump into that?
Absolutely, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this is a discussion of episode 2 from season 3 of the Clone Wars, which is again called ARC Troopers. And so full spoilers, but this has been out forever. So you've probably seen it. But anyways, with that said, Jay, I want to go ahead and give everybody the summary of this episode.
I would love to. When Anakin, Obi-Wan, and the 501st Clone Battalion intercept communications between Asajj, Ventress, and General Grievous, revealing a Separatist plan to attack and destroy the cloning facilities on Kamino, the Republic moves to protect this planet as it is vital to their war effort. Although the early stages of the battle go well for the Jedi and clones, things begin to take a turn when Asajj launches a sneak attack from the depths of Kamino's oceans. After a hard-fought victory, the Jedi and clones successfully defend their home and prevent the theft of Jango Fett's DNA. However, the victory does come at a serious price.
So we're taking a little break. The original plan was to get into Visions, but we just hadn't had time to digest any of those episodes. So we're going to start that next week. So we're briefly coming back to our Clone Wars rewatch here. And this is a fun episode. But Jay, what were your overall thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was so glad that we did come back to this. There's just something about the Clone Wars, when you come back to it, it's like coming home. But, you know me, and anybody that's listened to our show for any length of time knows that I love clones. Anything having to do with stories about their, personalities, the inner workings of, the ethics that go into this, their individualities, that type of thing. And then to see Asajj being truly Asajj in this was just glorious. As much as we love to see her since then, having her about face, if you will, her characterization in this is just so much fun. And I loved Obi-Wan in this as well, and his take on things with the underwater battle, so to speak. But great episode. Loved it. What about you?
Yeah, it's a fantastic episode. It's really good. It's a lot less. I mean, there's definitely a theme here, so don't get me wrong, but it's a lot less of a morality type of a story, and it's much more of an adventure and just talking about who clones are, which is cool, as you pointed out in this way. And then if you watch the featurette for this, you get to hear Dave Filoni talk about how much he likes designing clone armor. And so, he geeked out on that, and that was pretty cool. And listening to talk about that. And yeah, I'm with you. It was kind of fun to see the clones rally around defending their home, and then just so many of them in action at one time in this episode. They're just all over the place, and they really, really went all out and gave us a really great battle episode of the Clone Wars. I mean, that's not to say that we don't have plenty of other episodes that feature battles, but they're usually a much smaller portion of the episode. And this one was pretty much a battle almost from start to finish. And
It truly
so,
is.
yeah, so it really does put the war in the Clone Wars when it comes
And it
down to it.
reminded me a lot too. I mean, it had, I guess you could say, shades of the Tartakovsky Clone Wars in some ways, with some of the different vessels and machines and the way that things were were happening. But just to kind of backstep a little bit to what you said about the clones, defending their home world, and that was something that was said at the very beginning, that no one's gonna attack our home. Does it seem, I don't want to necessarily say odd, but the clones themselves having this type of loyalty to a home? I understand that's where they were created and where they were brought up, but then again, weren't they kind of bred to be soldiers and not having some of these attachments, so to speak? Because for me, that has more of those shades of like the Karen Travis novels that we've referenced before, the
Hmm.
clone commandos kind of thing, Republic Commando. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I was thinking about that too. Not quite the same way you were, but it was something that occurred to me that when I think of Camino, it's colored by a lot of the subsequent material, and I think, frankly, it's colored a lot by the Bad Batch series.
Hmm.
And we see from other sources how disposable the rest of the Republic views the clone army. In this case, in a lot of instances, they're not even thought of as human. But then we get into the Bad Batch and we see all of these senators that are trying to create relief efforts for these clones that had fought for the Republic and trying to get them some sort of retirement, some way of living and stuff like that. And we see how brutal with their ethics the Kaminoans could be when it comes to anything that they're
Right.
creating. And so the clones were really just a means to an end. But at the end of the day, the clones are still people, and we
Hmm.
all have a longing for some sort of a home. And while their independence might have been engineered out of them, I don't think you can engineer that portion of somebody's sense of belonging, sense of community out of them. And
Hmm.
what's the one place all these clones are going to have in common? It's going to be Kamino in that regard. And it just goes to show, when you don't know any better, I suppose, you could see something like Kamino's. This is where I'm from. I identify it. It's part of who I am.
Hmm.
And then I think of like the clones like Cut LaQuaine, who abandoned all this and made a home elsewhere with a wife and had a farm. I'm
Right.
pretty sure he doesn't think about Camino this way at all when it
Hmm.
comes down to it.
Yeah, exactly. And not that I begrudge the idea that the
Mhm.
clone should have any kind of affiliation with a home planet. It's just, me, I always like to dive into the psychology and the psyche and that type of
Mhm.
thing, and what's really going on with the motives of these different characters.
Indeed, indeed.
Hmm.
One of the things that also occurred to me when I was watching this is like, this is an episode about a level of Battlefront 2. Now, obviously, Battlefront 2 came after this, but there is this very battle that you can play, or one very similar to it in Battlefront 2,
Hmm.
with all the clones invading Kamino, and you're trying to get the DNA. You have to places you defend. It's all part of that, and I don't know. It just I've played that game a lot more than I've seen this episode, or those levels of that game than I've seen this episode over the past few years. So it was just kind of a weird deja vu moment in that regards, just from that perspective. Now, obviously, missing from Battlefront 2 were like the aqua droids and the like, but still the basics are the same between that episode
Hmm.
and the game.
Hmm. Yes, it definitely is.
Yeah. Okay. Some of the things that I found interesting, this episode is the first time that General Grievous and Asajj Ventress have met. They're clearly aware of each other, but they're jockeying for position in the hierarchy of the Sith slash Separatist alliance in all of
Hmm.
this. And it's kind of interesting. It's like at some points they're trying to be cordial, but in others it's kind of like they can't wait to off each other and take each other's place. But what did you
Right.
think about the interaction between these two?
Yeah, it's definitely strained. They're basically tolerating each other, but at the same time, like you said, they're not giving the other much leeway in terms of trust, or, they're just kind of there. And, even at the end when Asajj jumps onto the little escape pod that Grievous is once again fleeing in, you could just tell that when she's on board, she's just like, "Oh, great. I have to be
Yeah.
here," kind of thing.
I have a little mental canon mini-sode in my head about what happens afterwards. They escape from Kamino, they get aboard one of the Separatist Alliance ships, and then they have a holo communication with Count Dooku, and they're acting like siblings. It's his fault. No, it's her fault. She's the one that didn't do whatever. I mean, because it's just like the verbal sparring there. I mean, Asajj was doing what she does with like Obi-Wan in some cases. They're kind of bickering a little bit during the when they first encounter each other on Kamino after the invasion, and she like caresses his faceplate.
Oh, I
And
know.
yeah, I mean, she's, I don't necessarily call it seductress type of a thing, but she turns on those twisted charms in a way.
Mhm.
And but he's like, should I send an escort with you? Kind of implying that she's not as good. Well, he even goes so far as to say, your belly's impressive, almost as impressive as mine. So it is this almost sibling rivalry because they are competing for so much of the same attention.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely did not take Asajj's little, stroke of Grievous's faceplate as any kind of advance. It was just more almost condescending in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. But that's what I was getting at when I said that we get to see Asajj being really Asajj. This
Mhm.
is part of that because she's just that way.
Right. And speaking of her and those habits,
Mhm.
there is a
Mhm.
somewhat controversial moment in this episode where she runs a clone trooper through with her saber, and right before he dies, she gives him a kiss.
Yeah.
Now, that's how the episode originally came out, and my memory was that she kissed him on the lips. And then for a little while, they edited out that entirely, the kiss. But this time, she like kisses him on the cheek
Mhm.
here. I- Is your memory anything like mine, or what do you remember that?
I just remember her kissing him. I honestly don't remember if it was on the lips or on the cheek. I believe you,
Mhm.
it's but like you said, I think there's been a couple different versions maybe of this, but as you said, there was, a time where that was completely cut altogether.
Yeah.
So I was actually kind of somewhat surprised to see it in this episode, but also I guess, pleasantly surprised in a way too, just because the fact that it was the original version, you know what I mean? The
Mhm.
original idea of what Ventress was doing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's totally in keeping with her character there,
Right.
and, um, I guess it didn't bother me. I mean, I won't tell anyone they're wrong if they say it bothered them, but it was just weird that they flip-flopped on the decision to take it out and then put it back in, whether it was
Mhm.
altered or not, but there we are. So,
I
that
agree.
is I don't know. The more I'm thinking about it, maybe my memory is just wrong because it would seem like a lot of unnecessary work, to change her from kissing the clone on the lips to kissing him on the cheek, but who knows? Okay. Also, they went out of their way to make sure that once again, General Grievous and Anakin did not cross paths in this
Yes.
episode. All of Anakin's fights are against Asajj, and Obi-Wan is tasked with fighting Grievous in this one.
Mhm.
So I did kind of appreciate the continuity that they are still, it's really preserving one line and one line only from Revenge of the Sith. It's like General Grievous, what do you say? You're taller than I expected or something? No,
You're shorter than I
shorter
expected.
expect. Yeah, right. And then,
Exactly.
yeah, which is, I guess on the one hand, it's impressive, but the other things that they've gone to, I don't know. It just, of all the things to protect, that was just kind of a weird that they chose that over other things to really look out for continuity. You know what I mean?
I'm so glad that they did though,
Oh yeah.
because I mean, obviously with the precedents that Revenge of the Sith laid down in the way that it is very highly regarded as the best Star Wars movie ever among a lot of fans, that this would have definitely been something that fans could have very easily picked apart and say, but that's not how it was supposed to happen. And so I think that being careful about preserving that meeting was a very, very good choice. And, it upholds very well when you see this. However, I will say that sometimes seeing Obi-Wan fight Grievous so often does take a little bit away from the surprise that I feel that we originally felt when Obi-Wan fought Grievous in Revenge of the Sith.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So it's almost like the novelty kind of wore off just a little bit.
Yeah, no disagreement there. I mean, some of the things like I'm thinking of when I'm talking about how, they take pains to preserve that line from the Revenge of the Sith that, General Grievous, you're short and unexpected because they've never met is, okay, Obi-Wan Kenobi knows who C-3PO and R2-D2 are. C-3PO had his memory erased, but R2-D2 did not. And R2 would know also who Luke Skywalker was in this situation. Yet, that we all have our theories, but there's nothing explicitly stated anywhere in canon about why those people didn't recognize each other in A New Hope after everything that happened in the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith. But yet this one line warrants all this protection in here. That's all. I mean, I'm glad that they went to the extra mile, but it's just weird that they chose that and not some of the other stuff that's,
Mhm.
that are probably bigger continuity issues. As for General Grievous, I love the fight between Obi-Wan and Grievous here because frankly, we've had this discussion multiple times over the life of this podcast about for all of his reputation, there's one real fight with Grievous in Revenge of the Sith, and it's only after Obi-Wan loses his lightsaber that Grievous became any type of a threat, but he spent so much time running away from
Yes.
Obi-Wan.
Yes,
And he's
he
supposed to
did.
have this reputation of being the most fearsome Jedi killer in the galaxy, and it really seemed unearned if you just watch the movie. But here, he tosses Obi-Wan around some, and he never like really tries to run away. He keeps pursuing Obi-Wan in
Mhm.
this until the very end when he has to make a getaway because he's just outnumbered.
And he again kind of crawls away on those spider-like legs, which is
Mhm.
very reminiscent of some of the things that he does in the movie as well.
Yeah. I was just really impressed with the animation they did for him because, he
Oh,
splits his
yeah.
arms apart and the back two arms are the ones with the lightsabers. And he's walking around with the front half of it split, just like making regular hand gestures with these
Mhm.
lightsabers hanging over his shoulders. He's taunting Obi-Wan about it.
Yep.
Um, and then I also appreciated the fact that they let Obi-Wan like use the Force as much as he did as part of
Yeah.
that battle. He was unleashing Force pushes and really giving it to Grievous with everything he had, which kind of makes me wonder is just like, is there something about Grievous and the fear he instills with Jedi that just so knocks them off their game
Oh,
that
I think it's just yeah, him in general, just the amalgamation of human and he looks like a walking skeleton kind of thing. I
uh-huh.
don't know.
Okay, so we briefly brought them up a second ago, but the Aqua droids here, I don't think we've seen them yet prior to this episode in the Clone Wars. Is that your memory, or we have we seen them before?
If we have, I don't remember because we
Mm.
have so few battles that take place underwater or on water or in water that, my memory is not exactly, I'm not going to rely on it. Let's just put it that way.
Sure, sure. It's a cool design. I
Mhm.
know they come up again in some other sea ocean based episodes of the Clone Wars, so we'll see them again here. But really, really well carried out. I also like the plot that the Separatists had, which is they sent in their invasion fleet and they let the Republic fighters blow up portions of the transports, which were really just the portions that had the droids on, so they could plummet into the ocean, and they completely
Yeah.
snuck them past Kamino's defenses that way. They were,
Mhm.
but it was Obi-Wan is like, wait a minute, something about this isn't right. That was too easy, and he put two and two together, got the whole thing figured out.
Exactly. And meanwhile, Anakin's up in space, like the fight's up here. What are you talking about? But no,
Yeah.
I like the aqua droids as far as their design goes because they were very easily able to transform from basically seamless, from swimming and then walking and combat, and their bodies kind of reoriented, and they were able to draw blasters and, all kinds of fun stuff. So I think the design was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we need to talk some more about the clones in this one. Of course, our remaining rookies from season 1 are Echo and Fives. Of course, we get to know Echo a lot better later in this situation, but they're back as part of the army that's going to protect Kamino. They're given a special assignment to go take up sniper positions on a bridge later, but they're the two that have to break it to Clone 99, the defective, quote unquote, clone that Heavy is gone because he gave his life to protect theirs on the Rishi Outpost episode. What do you think about the return of our two favorite rookies?
Oh, it was so great to see. We always get so attached to a lot of these clones that are investigated or explored a little bit more carefully. And so we have, a little dear to our heart kind of feeling when we get to see them, especially with 99, because they were able to establish such a great relationship with him, based on some of the last episodes, and just the way that 99 was always wanting to be one of them, and he felt that he truly was. And so there's just that special bond between them, and it was great to see.
Yeah. I mean, of course, Five's fate will be determined before the Clone Wars ends, and then Echo, of course, will show up in the Bad Batch as part of that. But it is just kind of fun to go back and see these two characters when they're closer to the beginning of their story, as into much, much later, and what they become and what they're surviving, dealing with in like the Bad Batch and such. But I'm glad you brought up 99, because when we first got introduced to him, he was derided, especially by the non-clones there in Kamino. Thinking of the two bounty hunters, for being a reject, for being defective, whatever. And the whole idea was, if these rookies couldn't hack it, then we'll send them off to work with 99, doing sanitation and the like here on the station. But the clones here really didn't look at him with like any pity or anything. They did look at him as one of their brothers in this situation. And, he came up with a plan for going to the armory to find more weapons. And when they ran out of the grenades that they were using to fight off the battle droids in the barracks, he rushed off to get more. And, he's like, this is what I was bred for. This is what I made for. He viewed himself as I've got a role to play in the defense of this homeworld. And, the rest of them were like, no, don't go. What are you doing? Don't run off. And they mourned his loss when he took those shots and died.
Yeah. Unfortunately, too, I think he was so desperate to be quote unquote one of them that he did, in some instances, cause some of the clones to meet their demise, because he wanted so badly to help them. And there was one that was like, no, what are you doing here? Go, go, go. And then because that clone was being distracted by 99, he ended up dying. So, it's kind of like, yeah, it's great for him to be there, and he wants to be one of them, but it's also kind of tragic that his presence also brought about some of those deaths as well.
Yeah, I guess, though, that's as much on those clones as it is on 99, because if it had been another clone who ran off like that, would they have done that? I mean,
Right.
they're all there to defend the I guess basically what I'm saying is, like, I don't know that I'm gonna put those other clones on the death of those other clones on him, because if someone else had run off to get those grenades, and maybe they wouldn't have, but he just
Mhm.
wasn't afforded the opportunity for that training. But is that his fault? When it comes down to it, I mean, he was deemed a reject
Mhm.
there, so that's
Yeah,
as
I'm not
much
really
the Kaminoans' fault as
right.
anybody's.
Yeah. I'm not blaming him. I think what
Mhm.
it comes down to is that those clones were trying to protect 99. So it
Right.
wasn't that it was his fault for bringing that about. It was just a circumstance, of his presence kind of thing,
Mhm.
because they cared so much about him.
Yeah. And then they took advantage of the cadets, the kids in the barracks,
Mhm.
had them hide up there in their little hideaway beds, and then pop out at the last second and take out the droids from behind. I kind of
They
like
were
that
loving
maneuver there as
that.
well. Yeah.
Definitely. This is what we were bred for. It was cute.
Yeah. Little Daniel Logan
Yes.
participation in the episode
And I
there.
liked, again, talking about individuality, you got to see some of them had their hair cut different ways, and some of them, were blonde like Rex and Omega. And so that was cool that they integrated that individuality into those little troopers as well.
Hmm. What'd you think of the end when Anakin has fought Asajj off and he's retrieved the Jango Fett's DNA? So the donor DNA that they have. It's all they got left to make more clones. She gets it back, and then he takes it from her, and then as she's trying to pull it back again, the Force one of the clones grab it, and basically she says something along the lines like, oh, you're gonna arrest me or whatever, take me in, and then his response was, well, actually, I was just thinking of letting the clones execute you here right now in this situation.
Yeah.
I mean, no surprise, I guess, from what we know of Anakin, but is it too much like on the money for what we know of him? I mean, should it have been a bit more subtle, or what do you think about that line or that moment of the episode?
Yeah, it's kind of in some ways you can see it as like a throwaway line, like, oh yeah, I could just let them execute you right here and right now. But then again, I mean, knowing what Anakin's evolution eventually becomes, it's kind of like, "Ooh, wow, that's really dark, Anakin, and is that
Mhm.
truly the Jedi way?" But, war is war, so he could definitely play it off as that. And who really is Asajj? I mean, he's fought her several times before, as we know of, and he doesn't like her. So,
Right.
she is just kind of like an ant under his boot kind of thing. But, I was just glad that in the end, it was one of the clones that actually ended up with the DNA, because it just seems poetically justice, kind of thing.
Yeah, very apropos.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess this thing with Asajj is that they have a history, no doubt about it,
Mhm.
and she is responsible for the death of countless number of clones. We've seen her
Right.
slaughter a bunch of them, and so I could see, on the one hand, like doing such a thing would endear Anakin to the clones, no doubt about it. But at the same time, he's kind of supposed to be setting an example there,
Right.
and so yeah,
Good
I mean,
thing
we all know
Ahsoka
what he.
wasn't there.
Yeah, no kidding. That's too bad. I think she would have been a fun addition to this battle, but you
I
can only
agree.
include so much in one of these episodes when the whole thing is 24 minutes of screen time or so. But yeah, now I'm not intending to make a big deal of it, but it just did kind of like part of me for a moment was like, that's a bit on the nose for what we know of Anakin there. But okay, that is who he becomes, so it makes sense.
Mhm. I will say that it really made me cringe though when you see all the little embryo glasses, with
Oh
the
yeah.
and because you think about that in terms of a cartoon, and it's not as high stakes, but then you remember what you see in Attack of the Clones, and those are little babies in there. And I was like,
Hmm.
"Oh no, that's not good.
Nope.
Don't want to
Nope.
see that."
No, and thank you for not making those containers translucent so we
I
could see that
know. I
destruction.
was
Yeah,
thinking
so
the same thing. Well, I'm sure that that was intentional.
yeah, yeah. All right. Any other final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Oh, just such a great episode. Like I said, it's got a lot of the thematic greatness that is the Clone Wars, and a lot of fun aspects to this. Just seeing, like I said, the battle in the ocean on Kamino, because we've seen Kamino, above the ocean before this in Attack of the Clones, and also seeing how Obi-Wan was able to once again connect with an Iowa. Is that what those are called?
Yeah.
Those floating bird things, and saved him from perishing underneath the waters. So he definitely has his attachments to the living things instead of machines, more so. So that was cool to see too. But always enjoy this episode. What
I
about you?
think I was gonna say I think Kanan would have called it a connection
Yes.
more than attachment. But
There you go.
regardless,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Wrong word. Exactly. Very good.
yeah. No, I don't. I really don't have anything else to add. It's a fun episode. Like I said, it's got some themes to it, but it doesn't really dip so far into the morality of some of the some of the more in depth episode type things. But it's a fun battle. Like I said, it puts the war in
Mhm.
the Clone Wars, and
Yeah,
so I'm glad we got to discuss that here.
for sure.
But okay, well then I think that'll do it for our discussion of ARC Troopers. This episode of the Clone Wars. Yes, we should mention that the title comes because Echo and Fives do get promoted to ARC Trooper at the end of all this. But yeah, would have made sense to bring that up. Yes. But I don't know there's a whole lot more discussion to be had beyond that. But so, all right, now that we've slipped that in, we are going to wrap this up. Thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed the episode. If you want to make sure you get our ongoing discussion of the Clone Wars, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We're going to be taking a few weeks off as we work through season 3 of Visions. And but we might actually work in a couple episodes, because with this being the beginning of the holiday season, as we get close to Thanksgiving, it's going to be a little hard to keep up with news and stuff like that. So we're going to be doing some stuff in advance. So I would expect to get a few more the Clone Wars episode discussions at the end of the month. So if you're interested in that, yeah, make sure you're subscribed and you'll get those automatically, as well as our weekly look at the news and our other features such as World Between Worlds, where Jay rounds up fashion and lifestyle products. Our Revenge of the Sith series, we're getting close to the end of that. We've only got 2 episodes left. We're rapidly approaching the end of that movie. And yeah, so we got lots coming up here on the show. And then, of course, in December, we'll be getting to a lot of year-end wrap-up type episodes. That'll be fun to do as well. Great resource for all things Podcast Stardust is retrozapp.com. The entire catalog of the show is available there, as well as the other shows that are on the network. And Jay, you want to go ahead and give everybody what those social media contacts are again, and where else we can be found online if they want to contact us?
Sure thing. We are very easily found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust, and we do maintain some Pinterest boards, so you can check out those for all ideas for everything Star Wars. And we have our 2 YouTube outlets, so we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. No videos, just static pictures that Dennis always does a great job of picking out, but we'd love it if you would subscribe to both of those, share those out. Those do support reviews as well as comments. So let us know what you thought of this episode of the Clone Wars or any of our other episodes. And if you'd like to send us an email, you can do so at podcaststardust@gmail.com. Please send us your questions. And when we get enough, we will put them together in a listener question episode. So the last one that Dennis did was very well received, and we'd love to do another one as well. And if you are in need of some new fun Podcast Stardust clothing or home goods, you can head over to TeePublic, and the link to that is in our show notes. And if you do get something, please know that every one of those purchases does help to support the show, and we sure do appreciate it. So thanks in advance.
Okay. Upcoming on the show, on Wednesday, we are going to be discussing the novelization for Revenge of the Sith. And there's a lot to talk about, so make sure you join us for that. And then on Friday, we will wrap up the first week of November with a look at recent Star Wars news. So, thanks for listening to episode 960 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a fantastic week. And until next time, may the Force